So, what does all this tell us? Well, despite what you see in the media, getting a good education, finding someone that you love to share your life with, and starting a family seem to be the best route to wealth and prosperity at the very least. And if you follow that path, homeownership is very attainable. It's certainly getting tougher and tougher each year, but these things do move in cycles. Life gets hard, then it seems to get better. And when you go through hard times, it makes us all look at what we're doing and try to find ways to do it better. So keep doing the right things and living the right way. And somehow, some way, things tend to just work out. At least that is what I believe. But what do you think? What's up, all you relentless real estate rock stars out there? This is the Texas Real Estate and Finance Podcast market update for the week of January the 30th. And I'm your host, Mike Mills, a mortgage banker located right here in the Lone Star State. And each week I come to you with news about interest rates, the housing market, and anything else that might expand that real estate reality that we all experience every single day. However, when I'm not sharing my innermost thoughts on the internet, I'm helping people all over the country get into the home of their dreams. Whether it be new construction, rehab loans, home equity lines of credit, bridge loans, or just your standard FHA, VA, or conventional loans. My team and I are here to help make the process smooth and simple for everyone involved. And if you're one of our agent partners, we make sure that that transaction leads to 8 more. Want to know how we do it? Give me a call and I'll let you know. All right, now what is our lineup stacked with for today's episode? Well, mortgage rates are starting to come down, slowly but surely. The Fed is meeting tomorrow, and I will tell you when to expect the first rate cut of this year. Housing inventory has been on the rise all across the country, especially in Texas. But we might have hit the peak inventory for 2024. We're going to dive into some of those numbers. Also, right now, our government is spending like a drunken sailor on shore leave, and neither the red nor the blue team seems to be raising any alarms. I'm going to show you why our country could be on the verge of bankruptcy. After that, we're going to revisit the NAR rules that'll take effect on August the 17th, which is just right around the corner. We haven't forgotten about everyone's favorite story these days. Are you ready for the changes coming your way? Then we're going to look at a recent Zillow study that showed that right now, in order to buy a median home in the United States, you're going to need to make over $100,000 a year in income. And I'll show you where that income puts you compared to your neighbors. The numbers might surprise you. And for our main story today, I'm going to reintroduce to you a well-known and highly vilified mortgage product that most Americans would not dare consider taking advantage of. But if used right, could save you tens of thousands of dollars over the next 5 to 10 years. You just need to understand how they work. So stick around to the end for that. All right, now just a reminder, if today's episode brings you any value whatsoever, or even if you just like the way my silly mind works sometimes, then please do me a huge favor. Share this with your network. July was our biggest month for downloads, and I want to make August even better. And you guys are the reason for our growth. So thank you so much for tuning in each week and being a big part of this ever-growing community. I can't thank you enough. And you can thank me by telling a friend about us. So spread the word. It would mean so much to the show. Now, first up, everyone's favorite segment. Hey, Mike, what are the rates? Well, according to Mortgage News Daily, as of July 30th, 2024, the average 30-year fixed conventional mortgage rate is about 6.82%. The average 30-year FHA rate is about 6.27%. The average 30-year VA rate is about 6.28%. The average 15-year conventional rate is about 6.32%. And the average jumbo rate right now is about 7%. Now, I'm going to sound like a broken record here, but this week will be another big week for rates. You can expect some pretty good moves coming around on Friday. Why? Well, in one word, jobs, jobs, jobs. The JOLTS report was released today, and job openings continue to decline, reaching their lowest levels that we've seen since the pandemic. We're going to also get the June jobs report on Friday, and this is going to let us know where unemployment currently stands. Last month, we were at 4.1%, and a bump to 4.2% would trigger metrics indicating that we might be headed into recession if we aren't already there. And with the Fed meeting tomorrow, the likelihood of a rate cut right now is low, but the market is pricing in 100% chance for that long-awaited first Fed rate cut in September. And if and when that happens, you can expect rates to continue on their downward trend that we've seen over the last couple months. So if you were hoping for rates to fall to get people back into the market, it looks like it might be just right around the corner. Now, many people out there might be looking at the reported metrics that we see every week and ask, why right now would the Fed start cutting rates if the overall economic numbers indicate that the economy is still humming along at a great clip? Heck, if you watch any political ad these days, you're told that we are living in the best economy that anyone's ever participated in. So again, if this is the case, why would the Fed look at cutting rates? Because typically rates don't get cut unless the economy is in trouble. And as of right now, it was reported last week that GDP for the second quarter of 2024 came in at 2.8% up, which is really strong. And the median home prices reached all-time highs at $426,000. And the BLS jobs report that we got back in June said that we added 206,000 jobs to the economy, which is also really good. So according to all the metrics that we usually use to measure the strength of the economy, everything right now is looking awesome. So what's the problem? Well, if you believe these metrics are accurate, then the answer could be that the Fed is just trying to create a soft landing for the economy. Remember that the Fed has a dual mandate: stable prices and full employment. And last week, PCE, which is the Fed's favorite measure of inflation, came in at 2.6%. And right now, they feel like things for inflation are starting to trend downward, and they might be willing to cut rates before we get to that 2% mark that they aim for. But they also see unemployment rising at a steady rate, especially over the last couple of months. And they also might feel that right now is the time to start cutting rates before those numbers start to get out of control, which, oh, by the way, can happen really quickly when it comes to unemployment. Now, you can also believe, as I do, that these economic numbers that we're getting reported each month aren't entirely accurate, or even just not reflective of what is actually happening in the economy right now. GDP numbers reflect a large amount of government spending. Inflation numbers aren't reflective of things that the Fed can actually control, which is discretionary spending, which is much lower than the things that the Fed cannot control, like energy costs, insurance costs, rent costs, and food. And the biggest one is the unemployment rate. We are adding jobs to the economy, but almost all of these jobs are part-time jobs. And oh, by the way, a large majority of these jobs reports that we've seen over the last several months have all been revised down significantly from the initial numbers reported. So overall, things look and sound really good, but ask anyone on the street if the economy is doing as great as the media would lead you to believe. My guess is the answer you're going to get is no. And if that is true, then rates will be coming down faster than we even believe they will right now. Because at this time, the Fed only plans to cut rates one time for the rest of this year. Then they want to see what the impact of that cut will be through November and December, and then decide for 2025 how they want to proceed. And they've already stated that in 2025, they want to take the Fed funds rate from 5.25 down to 4.25. And that would mean a cut of 1/4 of a point at least for 4 meetings next year. And in 2026, they project a cut from 4.25 to 3.25. Again, 1/4 of a point at least 4 times next year. And as we understand it right now, the Fed has stated that the goal is to get the Fed funds rate just slightly lower than 3%. And if you remember, when rates were the lowest that they've ever been in the history of the country, the Fed funds rate was only 0.25%. So mortgage rates may be in the low 6s by the end of this year, and most likely in the mid 5s to low 6s by the end of next year. And if they get lower than that, then the economy is doing much worse than it is right now. And I'm not sure anybody really wants that. So buckle up. It's about to get interesting. All right, next. As many of you have seen and are starting to experience, inventory levels are up and rising, and listings have been aplenty lately, especially here in Texas. So then the question is, why haven't prices come down significantly to reflect this? Well, first of all, we have to understand that this is all relative. When you come from the lowest level of available inventory in history, jumping up inventory levels, even at 40%, like it is here in Texas right now, isn't as impactful as it may seem, because 50% of 2 is 1, and that'll get you to 3. So it's almost double. But double of what? All right, so with that backdrop a little bit, let's look at a few of the national numbers. So nationally, new listings added last week were 68,407 compared to 61,707 in 2023, but 73,462 in 2022. So listings are up slightly, but they are slowing as compared to earlier this year. And overall weekly inventory also grew from 668,000 single-family units for sale to 677,000 single-family units for sale. But remember, at this time in 2015, active listings were nearly double that at 1.2 million. And right now, we also have more people in households compared to 2015. Over 7 million more households have been formed since then. So we have half the inventory of 2015, but 7 million more possible buyers. Now, pending sales this week were at 381,000 compared to 375,000 this time last year, but still below 2022, which was at 417,000 pending sales. So we got more sales this year than last year at the same time, but still well below even 2022, which was a declining year for home sales. Now, the real data point that you want to keep in mind when looking at all this are mortgage applications, because right now we are running 15% behind this same time last year and 34% below 2022. And mortgage applications are an indication of where the market is headed for the rest of this year. Now, overall, applications have had a slight increase over the last couple of weeks because of the declining interest rates, but they are still running well below the last several years. In fact, right now, mortgage applications are at the lowest levels that we've seen in over 30 years. So listings are building, but buyers are still tough to come by. All right, now what about here in Texas? Well, a new report from Redfin says that Texas and Florida are seeing the fastest growing inventory of any other states for stale real estate listings, or listings that are not moving off the market very quickly. Remember, this again is all relative. Both Texas and Florida also had the lowest level of inventory of any state in 2021 and 2022. So we're in a bit of a recovery here. Now, the data from Redfin says that the number of stale listings is up 60% from a year ago due to high housing costs and an increasing supply of homes for sale. The report also says that nearly 65% of homes on the market in June were listed for at least 30 days without going under contract. Now, this year-over-year increase marks the biggest annual increase in a year and the highest share of any June since 2020, with over 40% of homes remaining on the market for at least 60 days. June was also the fourth month in a row that homes remained on the market for at least 30 days. But keep in mind that prior to 2020, the average days on market for a home in the United States ranged between 50 days during those seasonally busy months to 90 days during seasonally slow months. So we're just starting to move into that normal range. And oh, by the way, this is the time of year every year where homes sit on the market a little bit longer than they typically do. We just don't really remember it because we just came out of 4 years of absolute insanity. Now, active home listings for Texas reached 125,000 in the second quarter of this year. The overall statewide median home price is about 345,000, and that was just about 0.6% higher than the second quarter of 2023, while the overall numbers of homes sold decreased by 3% to 93,000. So listings are up, but slowing. Sales are down and slowing even more. But prices are only flattening out and not really falling much yet, because even though inventory is increasing, it hasn't gotten to the point to where it's far outpaced demand. And oh, by the way, this winter might be one of the slowest that we've seen in some time. But the good news is that we have a very strong likelihood with lower rates and bigger inventory of getting a big bump come next spring. So hold on just a little bit longer. The light at the end of this tunnel is coming. All right, now let's move on to a little bit of national news that will impact people's ability to buy and sell homes that you might have not been paying attention to. So right now, the US government is spending at a rate that we've never seen before. Our economy has for a very long time been engaged in what's called deficit spending, which just means that we're spending more on an annual level than we take in revenue. Now, in reality, this has been a pretty standard practice over the last 30 years. Okay, so the idea being to some extent that as inflation grows at its 2% clip, that the debt that we are paying on in the past is devalued and a little easier to maintain with more dollars in the future economy with the higher money supply. Now, I'm not arguing that's a good way to do it. I'm just saying that's how it works. But in the past 5 years alone, we have increased the rate of the deficit spending at an exponential level like we have never seen before. In fact, US federal debt just hit another record and is 2.5 billion from reaching 35 trillion for the first time in history. Since 2019, the US federal debt has skyrocketed by $13 trillion. That's a 37% increase in the national deficit in just 5 years. Federal debt in the United States has never grown so rapidly relative to the growth of the economy. And because of this, we are on an unsustainable fiscal path, and neither party in charge seems to be very concerned about it. The US deficit, in fact, is currently at World War II levels. So we are spending at a level like we were when the entire world was at war. So why are we spending at recession levels while the Fed and the US government is saying that the economy is still booming? And how dangerous is this US debt crisis going to become? And what kind of consequences are we going to have to pay if it all comes crashing down? And again, just in the last 4 years, the US debt has skyrocketed by $11 trillion. And by comparison, reaching the first $11 trillion worth of debt in the US took us 220 years. That's right, 220 years to get what we've just achieved in 4. Interest payments alone on the debt are expected to exceed $1.14 trillion this year. In June, interest payments consumed 76% of all personal income taxes collected. And that number is only expected to increase over the next several months and into next year. Interest on the national debt was the government's single largest expense in June alone, surpassing critical public services such as the Department of Health and Human Services and the Social Security Administration, which is our largest budget item to date. Now, in my personal opinion, this is the biggest threat to our economic stability out there right now. Because how can this level of spending be maintained without crashing this whole thing? And why is no one in charge raising alarms about this right now? Not one major political party is making this a focus of their platform, and no presidential candidate is talking about this at any of the rallies. In fact, we're talking more about cutting taxes or increasing spending than anything else right now. Now, look, I don't claim to be a Harvard economist here, but even I can see that this is not sustainable. So my question is there some other bigger threat that we aren't aware of that we'll look back on in 5 years and find this one to be insignificant? I have no idea. I honestly just want to know what the plan is to solve this issue. Because if this economy tanks, the government's going to have to take out more debt to prop it up or print more money to dig us out. Then rates and inflation will stay high. And where does that put us overall? I really would love to know your thoughts. I have no idea. What do you think? All right, next up. August 17th is quickly approaching, and all the new NAR rules will be in full effect for all you realtors out there. So my question is Are you ready for this? Now, many outside the industry are expecting these changes to have dramatic effects on realtor commissions as we move into 2025, possibly causing many to leave the industry altogether. Now, I do feel like that still remains to be seen, and thus far, even with historically low sales and volume, many agents have been able to weather the storm, with some even having some of the best years of their career. So the question is, which category are you going to fall into? All right, with that said, here is a reminder of the changes coming our way so you're ready to put these into play. Number one, the changes will eliminate and prohibit any requirement of offers of compensation in the MLS between listing brokers or sellers to buyer brokers or other buyer representatives. So, no offers to buyer agents anywhere on the MLS for compensation or on your listing description. And I would be very careful of putting these anywhere else in public view, as there are going to be lots of people looking for you to slip up and break the rules. Remember, there are going to be a lot of hall monitors out there. So be very careful with whatever tricks you have up your sleeve to try to let buyers know that you're willing to pay buyer compensation. So these rules will require the MLS to eliminate all broker compensation fields and compensation information from the MLS. So you cannot put it anywhere. They will also require the MLS to not create, facilitate, or support any non-MLS mechanism, including providing listing information to an internet aggregator's website for such a purpose. For these participants, subscribers, or sellers to make offers of compensation to buyer brokers or other buyer representatives. So Zillow, Redfin, Homes.com, or any other aggregators out there will also not allow offers of compensation to be listed on their sites. Now, these rules are also going to reinforce that MLS participants and subscribers must not, and MLSs must not enable the ability to filter out or restrict MLS listings that are communicated to customers or clients based on the existence or level of compensation offered to the cooperating broker or the name of the brokerage or agent. So, don't steer your clients away from a listing because they aren't offering compensation. Not that you would be doing that anyway. But again, there are going to be lots of hall monitors out there, and litigation is the zeitgeist of the society that we live in real estate. So lawyers, consumers, everybody's going to be looking to find you making a mistake. So don't do anything dumb. Now, these changes are also going to require compensation disclosures to sellers as well as prospective sellers and buyers. And these have to be very clear and upfront to the buyer and seller as to what is being paid out to who and when during the transaction. Now, this should be a pretty general practice anyway that most agents were following, but they are going to be cracking down more. And again, people are going to be watching. Now, this will also require MLS participants working with the buyer to enter into a written agreement with the buyer prior to touring a property. To me, this is going to be the biggest one, as this was a practice that was always suggested and I would say generally followed, but not really enforced. And now it's going to be much more enforceable if you do not do this. So you have to establish upfront with your buyer how much you will be compensated based on the house that you write an offer on. Now, to my knowledge, right now, you can have multiple agreements with buyers on different properties if you like, or even just a temporary agreement that doesn't require compensation just to see homes. But this is a piece that you need to get with your broker on and decide how you're going to approach each individual situation. And if you haven't done this already, this should be a top priority for you over the next couple of weeks. Because listen, conversations about compensation can be very tricky and complicated depending on the buyer. So you need to have a game plan now on how you're going to approach these conversations. Because like I said, in my opinion, this is going to be the most impactful and most challenging part of these changes. And you need to become an expert really, really quick in navigating these conversations, because it could be the difference between you staying in this career for the long haul or looking for another job. All right, next up, according to a February 2024 Zillow analysis, Americans need to earn around $106,500 annually to comfortably afford a typical home in the United States. Now, this is an 80% increase from the $59,000 yearly income that Zillow predicted back in 2020. And Bankrate estimates that the Americans need to earn about $110,000 annually to afford a median price home, which currently is over about $400,000 nationally. So does this mean that the average American can no longer afford to buy a home? Do you have to be an upper class citizen to be a homeowner? Well, I guess it all kind of depends on what we define as average or upper class. So the term upper class evokes images of wealth and privilege, but what does it truly mean in terms of income? While there's no definitive line, typically they say households in the top 20% of earners are generally considered to be upper class. And according to the US Census Bureau, the median household income in 2022 was about $74,500. Now, this is the middle, not the average. So to reach the upper class in 2024, you typically need an income exceeding about $153,000, which is more than double the national median income. And according to the Pew Research Center report in 2022, the median household income for a 3-person upper class family was about $257,000. And for the middle class, the median income was about $106,000 for a family of 3. So for a family of 3, which typically includes 2 incomes, the average American household can still afford the median home price, at least according to these numbers. But Income and net worth are two very different things. You may have a good income, but no savings and no assets because you have to spend every nickel you make and live paycheck to paycheck. Now, the US Census data from 2021 shows that the median net worth varies considerably across economic classes. The upper class possess nearly 67 times the net worth of the lower class. Here's a breakdown of it. So the average lower class net worth is about $12,000. This is net worth, not income. The average lower to middle class net worth is about $61,000. The average middle class net worth is about $145,000. The average upper middle class net worth was about $269,000. And the average upper class net worth was about $805,000. And by the way, if you want to know how to calculate your net worth, you take your assets and their value, whether it be checking, savings, real estate, and you subtract any debt that's owned on that, and that is your net worth. So how much money do you have saved? How much do you have in assets versus how much debt you have? And there's your net worth. If you were to sell everything and cancel all your debt, how much cash would you have left over? Now, in this study, they also showed that college degrees, which have been kind of downplayed recently in most communities, especially as it relates to the cost versus the benefit of these degrees, that actually played a pretty crucial role when it comes to wealth accumulation. In 2021, households headed by individuals with graduate or professional degrees had a median net worth of about $556,000, compared to just about $8,500 for those with just a high school diploma. So at least as far as wealth accumulation is concerned, education is still a big determining factor, at least up to this point. Now, according to the same study conducted in 2022, men were also slightly more likely than women to be in upper income households, with 18% of men and 16% of women falling into this category. However, marriage appears to be a significant boost to the economic status of Americans. Among those married in 2022, 24% are in the upper income households. In contrast, only 7% of those who were separated, divorced, widowed, or never married were in the upper income household. So there is still a lot to be said about family and community being something that builds us up, and that this single living your best life lifestyle doesn't really translate to wealth, at least for the long term. So what does all this tell us? Well, despite what you see in the media, getting a good education, finding someone that you love to share your life with, and starting a family seem to be the best route to wealth and prosperity at the very least. And if you follow that path, homeownership is very attainable. It's certainly getting tougher and tougher each year, but these things do move in cycles. Life gets hard, then it seems to get better. And when you go through hard times, it makes us all look at what we're doing and try to find ways to do it better, at least those of us that have success. So keep doing the right things and living the right way. And somehow, some way, things tend to just work out. At least that is what I believe. But what do you think? Okay, for our final topic today, let's revisit an often vilified loan product that was the poster child of the Great Recession, but in the current market environment may actually be one of the best debt instruments available to you that could save you tens of thousands of dollars over the next several years, if you understand it and know how to use it in the right way. Yes, I am talking about adjustable rate mortgages, or ARMs. Okay, now, before you turn this off and say that you would never do this or suggest it to a client, just hear me out for a second. So let's start first by defining exactly what an adjustable rate mortgage is. An adjustable rate mortgage is a type of home loan with an interest rate that can change periodically. With almost any ARM, there is an initial fixed rate period. ARMs usually start with a fixed rate of a certain period of time, typically 3, 5, or 7 years. Then, after the initial fixed rate period is ended, the loan will go through an adjustment period. And during that time, the rate can adjust up or down. Yes, it can adjust down, but it only does it once a year, not every week or month or anything like that. And it adjusts based on market condition and the index that the ARM is based off. So these seem simple enough, right? There's no calculus here. So why did these loans get such a bad rap? Well, during the housing boom of the early 2000s, many borrowers took out ARMs with low initial rates and low initial monthly payments without fully understanding the risks. Now, there are many out there that would say that you're an adult and you should have known what you were getting into. But I say that there were many out there doing my job who took advantage of people's ignorance and just saw dollar signs and chose not to explain to people how these work and warn them of the risks. And in a lot of cases, these loan officers didn't understand them themselves and were hired to dial out and get people committed because there was so much money flying around for these loans. And this was just the reality of mortgages and real estate in the early 2000s. Just go watch the movie The Big Short and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. It was a great movie and it really explains everything that happened in a very simple, understandable way. So then what happened? Well, buyers experienced what's called a payment shock when their initial low rate period ended and their payments ballooned by hundreds of dollars a month. And people who had multiple properties or qualified with income that wasn't real because it was only stated and not verified, these people could then not afford to make those payments and therefore had to foreclose. And then a flood of homes hit the market because of the frequent use of these products and the lack of education on how they work. But also because lenders were incentivized in many ways to give out more of these loans. And they didn't have to verify the income or assets like we do today. And I would argue That piece of not verifying borrowers' ability to repay these loans once they adjusted was the real cause of the collapse and not just the adjustable rate itself. This is what led to lenders often approving loans without proper income verification, resulting in borrowers taking on more debt than they could actually afford. Scary stuff, right? And you don't want to be a part of that kind of game. But let's look at where they are now and take a little bit different approach. So for the last 2 years, interest rates have been higher for longer than most of the industry expect. And we are just now starting to see these rates come back down. Now, I don't believe that we're headed back to the 2 to 3% mortgage rates, but we could be in the 4% range within the next couple of years. So with that backdrop, let's look again at how these adjustable rates could work. First off, in many cases, ARMs typically offer lower initial rates compared to fixed rate mortgages, which can result in a lower monthly payment initially. Recently, however, this has not really been the case. Fixed rates have had the same and sometimes better rates than ARMs in the recent history. Why is that? Well, the Federal Reserve increased short-term rates, making it harder for lenders to offer competitive ARM rates. This is due to an inverted yield curve. Now, an inverted yield curve occurs when short-term interest rates are higher than long-term rates. This particular situation is unusual and often signals economic uncertainty or expectations of future economic slowdown, because normally long-term rates are higher than short-term rates because lenders demand more compensation for the risk of lending money over a longer period of time. Because that just makes sense, right? So when the Fed starts to lower these short-term rates, which is most likely what is going to begin occurring in September, the immediate effect is a decrease in interest rates for short-term bonds and loans, including ARMs. Now, long-term rates might not decrease as much. And in some cases, like crazy national debt, they actually can go up if investors expect stronger future economic growth due to the Fed's action. Now, this expectation of improved economic conditions could lead to higher demand for long-term investments, driving yields up. So as the Fed begins lowering these short-term rates, you should start to see ARM rates reacting at a much faster pace than the standard 30-year fixed, meaning that these ARM rates might be cheaper much sooner than the fixed rates. Add to that a declining rate environment over the next several years, and that means that if you chose to do an ARM to buy or refinance your home, the likelihood that you wouldn't have to do another refinance every few years, adding more cost to your loan each time that you do it, increases. So in the very near future, an adjustable rate mortgage could have a lower rate for a fixed 3, 5, 7, or 10 years than a 15 or 30-year fix. It's also very likely to automatically adjust down when your rate adjustment period begins to the lowest rate on the market at that time, saving you thousands in interest on its way down and adjusting every single year downward. And this also means that you would not have to spend thousands of dollars refinancing each time that the market rate falls, saving you money on your current fixed rate. Now, again, you need to intimately understand how these ARMs work, which is why having a mortgage professional on your side explaining all this and guiding you each year on the next move is incredibly important. You also need to feel secure in your job and your income so that if the time does come when the market starts to turn to a higher rate environment, then it'll be time to pull that trigger on the permanent refinance into a fixed rate as we enter an increasing rate environment. I hate to say that debt is a game because it's a very dangerous one if you don't know what you're doing, but it is a game. And the wealthy play it all the time, and they play it really well. And if you know the rules and have someone to help you navigate through the rough spots, it can be a game that you can win. So if you want to know more about it, give me a shout. I'm happy to walk you through. Welcome, Padres. That is all for today. Thank you for sticking around to the end. I hope I was able to help you understand the market in this real estate game just a little bit better today. I'm learning with you and sharing what I know as I go. So thanks for being on this journey with me, and join me live on Friday when I talk to Joseph North. Joseph's using technology to help property owners manage and cut costs on their assets, focusing on slaying that tax dragon that we all have to fight once a year. So tune in and learn how to save money on property taxes without lifting a finger. Check it out if you like money. But until then, be great humans and keep grinding. Because life is what you make it. So make it great. See you later.